12-year-old Tyler pedaled his bike down Maple Street, his backpack bouncing gently as he rode. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet neighborhood where he'd lived his entire life. He'd just spent 3 hours at the public library working on a school project about World War II, and his head was still full of facts about battles and heroes. The cool breeze felt good on his face as he took the familiar route home. Tyler wasn't in any hurry. His mom wouldn't be back from her nursing shift until 6, and he had the house to himself until then. He loved these peaceful rides through his neighborhood, watching the old oak trees sway and seeing neighbors tending their gardens. Mrs. Patterson was watering her roses, and she waved at him like she always did. Mr. Chen was fixing something on his porch. Everything felt normal and safe. That's when he heard the siren. The police car appeared behind him seemingly out of nowhere, its lights flashing red and blue. Tyler's heart jumped. He wasn't doing anything wrong, was he? He'd been riding carefully, staying in the bike lane just like his parents taught him. He slowed down and pulled over to the curb, just like he'd seen people do in movies. Officer Bradley stepped out of the patrol car. He was a big man with a stern face and dark sunglasses that hid his eyes. His uniform was perfectly pressed and his badge gleamed in the sunlight. He walked over to Tyler with heavy steps, his hand resting on his belt. "Kid, you know why I stopped you?" Officer Bradley's voice was sharp and unfriendly. Tyler shook his head, genuinely confused. "No, sir, I was just riding home from the library." "You were weaving all over the place back there. Riding reckless." The officer crossed his arms. "Could have caused an accident." Tyler frowned. He'd been riding the same way he always did, staying in his lane and being careful. "I don't think I was weaving, sir. I always ride carefully." "Don't argue with me, kid." Officer Bradley's tone got harder. "I saw what I saw. Now where exactly do you live?" "Just 2 blocks that way on Oak Street." Tyler pointed in the direction of his house. The officer looked around the neighborhood with suspicious eyes. These were nice houses with well-kept lawns and expensive cars in the driveways. "Oak Street, huh? What's your address?" Tyler gave him the house number. Officer Bradley wrote it down in his notebook, taking his time. "And what were you doing riding around here if you live on Oak Street?" "I was coming back from the library. I take this street because it's the safest way home. My mom always tells me to stay on the quiet streets." Tyler was starting to feel nervous. Why was the officer asking so many questions about something so simple? "Your mom, huh?" Officer Bradley looked at Tyler more closely. "Where's your dad?" Tyler's chest puffed up with pride. "He's deployed overseas. He's in the Special Forces." Officer Bradley's eyebrows went up and then he let out a short laugh. "Special Forces? Really?" "Yes, sir. He's been gone for 8 months. He's coming home soon, though." Tyler smiled, thinking about his dad's last video call where he promised to be back before Tyler's birthday. The officer shook his head with a smirk. "Kid, you don't need to make up stories. Lots of kids don't have dads around. It's nothing to be ashamed of." Tyler's smile disappeared. "I'm not making it up. My dad really is in Special Forces. He sends me pictures and everything." "Sure he does." Officer Bradley's voice was full of disbelief. "And I suppose he's some kind of war hero too?" Heat rose in Tyler's cheeks. He hated when people didn't believe him about his dad. It happened sometimes at school and it always made him angry. "He is a hero. He's protecting our country. Look, son, I've heard every story in the book. Kids love to make up tales about their absent fathers. Some say they're rock stars. Some say they're professional athletes. Special Forces is a new one, I'll give you that." Tyler felt tears starting to form in his eyes, but he blinked them back. His dad had taught him never to cry in front of people who were trying to make him feel small. "Why don't you believe me?" Officer Bradley sighed like he was dealing with a difficult child. "Because if your daddy was really some hotshot Special Forces soldier, maybe he would have taught you how to ride a bike properly. Maybe he would have taught you some respect for authority." The words hit Tyler like a punch to the stomach. His dad had taught him to ride a bike. His dad had taught him lots of things during their video calls and in the letters he sent. His dad was a good father even if he couldn't be there in person right now. By now, a few neighbors had started to notice what was happening. Mrs. Patterson had stopped watering her roses and was watching from her yard. Mr. Chen had come down from his porch and was standing by his mailbox, looking concerned. A woman Tyler didn't recognize was walking her dog and had slowed down to see what was going on. "Can I just go home now?" Tyler asked quietly. "I wasn't doing anything wrong." "We'll see about that." Officer Bradley pulled out his citation book. I'm going to need to see some identification. I don't have any. I'm 12. Tyler was starting to panic. Can I call my mom? In a minute. First, let's talk about this reckless riding. And loitering. Loitering. But I was just riding home. You were riding suspiciously slow, looking around at houses. That's loitering in my book. Officer Bradley started writing something down. And the reckless riding. That's 2 violations right there. Tyler couldn't believe what was happening. He'd never been in trouble with the police before. He'd never even gotten detention at school. Please, can I just call my mom? She can explain everything. Officer Bradley looked up from his citation book. Oh, I'm sure she can. I'm sure she's got all kinds of explanations. But first, why don't you tell me again about this Special Forces father of yours? What's his rank? What unit is he with? Tyler's voice got stronger when he talked about his dad. He's a staff sergeant. I don't know his unit number, but he's stationed in Germany right now. He's been in the Army for 15 years. Germany? Officer Bradley laughed again. Kid, you watch too many movies. Special Forces doesn't work like that. Yes, they do. My dad calls me every Sunday at 3 o'clock. He tells me about his training and his missions. Well, the stuff he's allowed to tell me. Tyler was getting frustrated. Why was this so hard to believe? The small crowd of neighbors was growing. A few people had their phones out, and Tyler thought he saw someone recording. He felt embarrassed and scared. What if his friends saw this video online? What if his mom saw it? Officer Bradley noticed the growing audience too, and his expression got even more serious. All right, that's enough. I think we need to have a longer conversation about this. And maybe we need to have a talk with your mother about keeping better track of you. Tyler's heart was racing now. This was spinning out of control, and he didn't know how to make it stop. All he wanted was to go home and wait for his mom to get back from work. All he wanted was for this police officer to believe him about his dad. But as Officer Bradley continued writing citations, and the neighbors continued watching, Tyler realized this afternoon was going to be very different from what he'd planned. And somewhere deep in his chest he felt a growing anger that someone was disrespecting his father, the man he admired most in the world. Officer Bradley finished writing the first citation and tore it from his book with a sharp rip. Tyler watched the paper flutter slightly in the breeze as the officer held it out to him. Here's your ticket for reckless riding. That'll be a $150 fine. Officer Bradley's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was ordering coffee. Tyler stared at the piece of paper in disbelief. $150? For riding my bike? For riding it recklessly, the officer corrected. And we're not done yet. I still need to see some identification. Since you don't have any, I'm going to need to verify who you are and where you live. But I told you where I live. It's just 2 blocks away. Tyler's voice was getting higher with stress. Can't I just show you my house? Anyone can point to a house, kid. That doesn't prove you live there. Officer Bradley was already working on a second citation. What I need is proper identification or a parent present. Tyler fumbled for his phone with shaking hands. He'd been putting off calling his mom because he knew she was in the middle of her shift at the hospital. She worked in the emergency room, and he'd been taught never to call unless it was a real emergency. But this felt like an emergency now. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. Tyler tried again with the same result. His mom was probably with a patient and couldn't answer. No answer? Officer Bradley looked satisfied, like this proved his point somehow. Funny how these absent parents are never around when you need them. She's working. She's a nurse in the emergency room at General Hospital. Tyler was trying hard to keep his voice steady. She can't always answer her phone right away. Uh-huh. The officer didn't sound convinced. And what about this Special Forces father? Can't call him either, I suppose. He's overseas. The time difference makes it hard to call, and he's usually training during the day. Tyler could feel the eyes of all the neighbors on him. Mrs. Patterson had come closer to her fence, clearly trying to hear what was happening. Officer Bradley laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. Of course he is. Let me guess, top secret missions? Can't talk about where he is or what he's doing? Some of it is classified, yes, sir. Tyler's chest tightened. He hated how the officer was making his dad's important work sound like a lie. Kid, I've been a cop for 20 years. I've heard every sob story you can imagine. Absent fathers who are supposedly doctors, lawyers, professional athletes, movie stars. Special Forces is creative, I'll give you that, but it's still just a story. The words stung worse than any physical hit could have. Tyler felt his hands ball into fists, but he forced them to stay at his sides. His dad had taught him that fighting never solved anything, that real strength came from staying calm even when others tried to provoke you. "It's not a story," Tyler said quietly, but with steel in his voice. "My dad is a real hero. He's risking his life to protect people like you." Officer Bradley's expression darkened. "People like me? What's that supposed to mean?" Tyler realized how his words might have sounded and quickly tried to explain. "I just meant people back home, Americans. He's protecting all of us." "Sure he is." The officer finished writing the second citation and held it out. "Here's another one for failure to provide proper identification. That's another $100. Tyler took the second paper with numb fingers. $250 in fines for riding his bike home from the library. His mom was going to be devastated. Money was already tight with his dad deployed, and her working extra shifts to make ends meet. Mrs. Patterson couldn't stay quiet any longer. She walked over to her fence and called out, "Officer, excuse me. I know this boy and his family. They're good people." Officer Bradley turned toward her with an annoyed expression. "Ma'am, please step back. This is police business." "But I can vouch for him," Mrs. Patterson insisted. "I've lived next door to his family for 8 years. His father really is in the military. I've seen him in uniform many times. Military and special forces are two different things, ma'am. Anyone can buy a uniform at an army surplus store." Officer Bradley's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Please return to your property and let me do my job." Mrs. Patterson looked frustrated but stepped back. Tyler felt grateful that she'd tried to help, but also embarrassed that his neighbors were seeing him get in trouble with the police. Mr. Chen had also moved closer, and Tyler could see him recording with his phone. A few other people had come out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. This was turning into a spectacle, and Tyler just wanted it to end. Officer Bradley seemed to enjoy having an audience. He stood straighter and spoke louder, like he was performing. "Now, son, I'm going to ask you one more time. What's your father's full name and unit designation?" Tyler's mind raced. He knew his dad's name, of course, but he'd never memorized his unit number or all the military details. He was 12 years old and hadn't thought those things were important to remember. "His name is Sergeant David Williams," Tyler said. "I don't know his unit number by heart." "It's written down at home. David Williams?" Officer Bradley shook his head. "Kid, that's one of the most common names in America. You couldn't come up with something more creative?" Tyler felt his face get hot. It's his real name. "Why would I make that up?" "Because kids make up names all the time, especially when they're trying to get out of trouble." The officer was writing in his notebook again. "Let me ask you this. If your dad is such a big-shot Special Forces hero, why are you riding around on an old bike in hand-me-down clothes?" Tyler looked down at his clothes. His jeans were a little too big because they used to be his older cousin's. His shoes had a small hole in them that he'd been hiding from his mom because he knew she couldn't afford new ones right now. His bike wasn't new either, but it worked fine and he loved it. "We don't need fancy things," Tyler said quietly. "My mom says military families have to be careful with money." "Right, because daddy's deployed fighting the bad guys." Officer Bradley's voice was dripping with sarcasm. "Tell me, when was the last time you actually saw this father of yours?" Tyler's throat tightened. 14 months ago, before he left for his deployment. 14 months? The officer raised his eyebrows. "That's a long time for a kid not to see his dad. Makes you wonder if daddy's really coming back, doesn't it?" The question hit Tyler like a slap. It was his worst fear, the thing that kept him awake some nights. What if something happened to his dad overseas? What if he never came home? Tyler pushed those thoughts away every time they surfaced. But hearing them spoken out loud by this stranger made them feel more real and more terrifying. "He's coming back," Tyler said, but his voice was shaky now. "He calls every week. He writes letters. He's coming home next month for my birthday." "Uh-huh. And I suppose he's going to come riding in like some kind of cavalry rescue?" Officer Bradley was enjoying himself now, feeding off Tyler's obvious distress. "Maybe he'll come teach you how to ride that bike properly?" Tyler's phone buzzed with a text message. His heart leaped, hoping it was his mom, but it was just a reminder about a school assignment. He tried calling his mom again, but it went straight to voicemail this time. Still no answer. Officer Bradley noticed Tyler's disappointment. "Funny how these people are never available when their kids need them. Makes you think about what kind of parents they really are." "My mom is a good parent. Tyler's voice cracked with emotion. She works 2 jobs to take care of us while Dad's away. She's helping sick people right now. Sure she is, kid. Sure she is. Officer Bradley pulled out a 3rd citation form. You know what? I think we need to add disturbing the peace to your list of violations. All this yelling and carrying on isn't appropriate for a quiet neighborhood like this. Tyler looked around at the growing crowd of neighbors. Some looked concerned, others seemed angry, and a few were definitely recording everything. He felt trapped and small and more alone than he'd ever felt in his life. All he'd wanted was to ride home from the library and maybe do some homework before his mom got back from work. Instead, he was standing on a street corner with a police officer who seemed determined to humiliate him and make him feel worthless. But even as tears threatened to spill from his eyes, Tyler held on to one thing. His dad was a hero no matter what this officer said. His dad was brave and strong and good, and someday soon he'd be coming home. Tyler just had to be strong until then, just like his dad had taught him to be. The crowd of neighbors had grown to about 15 people now, and Officer Bradley was starting to look uncomfortable with all the attention. Tyler could hear whispered conversations around him, and he caught fragments of what people were saying. That's little Tyler Williams. His dad really is in the military. I've seen his father in uniform before. This is getting out of hand. Officer Bradley heard the whispers too, and his jaw tightened. He didn't like having his authority questioned, especially not in front of a bunch of civilians with cameras. He clicked the radio on his shoulder and spoke into it. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need backup at the corner of Maple and 3rd Street. I've got a juvenile situation that's drawing a crowd. Tyler's eyes went wide. Backup? This was getting worse by the minute. Officer, please, I just want to go home. I promise I wasn't doing anything wrong. You should have thought about that before you started causing a disturbance. Officer Bradley kept his hand on his radio. And before you started lying to a police officer about your family situation? I wasn't lying. Tyler's voice was getting desperate now. Everything I told you is true. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward again despite the officer's earlier warning. Officer Bradley, I know this family personally. They live right there on Oak Street in the blue house with the white trim. The boy's mother is Linda Williams, and she works at General Hospital. His father really is deployed overseas. Officer Bradley spun around to face her. Ma'am, I already told you to step back. This is official police business, and I won't have civilians interfering. I'm not interfering, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. I'm providing character witness for my neighbor. This boy has never been in any kind of trouble. Well, he's in trouble now. The officer's voice was getting louder, and if you don't step back, you might find yourself in trouble too for obstruction. Mr. Chen spoke up from where he was standing. Officer, with all due respect, we're not obstructing anything. We're standing on public property, and this boy hasn't done anything wrong that any of us can see. Are you a police officer, sir? Bradley's attention shifted to Mr. Chen. Are you trained in law enforcement procedures? No, but I'm trained in common sense, Mr. Chen replied calmly. And I know when I'm watching someone abuse their authority. Tyler watched this exchange with growing horror. Now the neighbors were getting in trouble because of him. This was spiraling completely out of control, and he didn't know how to make it stop. Officer Bradley's radio crackled to life. Unit 47, backup is en route. ETA 3 minutes, 3 minutes. Tyler's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. What would happen when more police officers arrived? Would they arrest him? Would they take him to jail? He tried calling his mom one more time, and this time she answered on the 2nd ring. Tyler. Honey, I can't talk long. We've got a trauma coming in, and... She must have heard something in his voice because she stopped mid-sentence. Tyler, what's wrong? Are you okay? Mom, I'm in trouble. There's a police officer here, and he gave me tickets, and he doesn't belly. How the dad is in special forces, and now he's calling for backup, and I don't know what to do. The words tumbled out of Tyler in a rush. Slow down, baby. Where are you? On Maple Street. I was just riding home from the library, and Officer Bradley held out his hand. Let me talk to your mother. Tyler hesitated, not wanting to give up his phone, but the officer's expression made it clear he didn't have a choice. He handed over the phone. Ma'am, this is Officer Bradley with the city police. Your son was riding recklessly and has been issued several citations. I'm going to need you to come down here and provide proper identification for him. Tyler couldn't hear his mom's side of the conversation, but he could see Officer Bradley's expression getting more irritated. Ma'am, I don't care what your work situation is. Your son is in violation of several municipal codes, and as his parent, you need to take responsibility. No, ma'am, I cannot just let him go home. Because he was riding dangerously and loitering in a neighborhood where residents have reported suspicious activity. Tyler's jaw dropped. No one had reported suspicious activity. The officer was making that up. Furthermore, Bradley continued, your son has been telling elaborate stories about his father being in special forces, which suggests a pattern of deceptive behavior that needs to be addressed. Tyler could hear his mom's voice getting louder through the phone, though he couldn't make out the words. Whatever she was saying, Officer Bradley didn't like it. Ma'am, if you can't get here within the next 10 minutes, I'll have to take your son to the station until proper arrangements can be made. Yes, ma'am, I am serious. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the air. Tyler felt sick to his stomach. 2 more police cars were coming, their lights flashing as they turned onto Maple Street. Officer Bradley handed the phone back to Tyler. Your mother says she's stuck in traffic, but she's trying to get here. In the meantime, we're going to sort this whole situation out. Tyler put the phone to his ear. His mom was crying. Tyler, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm about 20 minutes away in traffic, but I'm coming as fast as I can. Listen to me very carefully. Be polite, don't argue, and don't say anything else about your father unless they ask you a direct question. Do you understand? Yes, Mom. But why doesn't he believe me about Dad? I don't know, honey. Some people just... Look, we'll figure this out when I get there. I love you. The backup officers were getting out of their cars now. Tyler saw 2 more uniformed officers walking toward them, and his hope sank even further. 3 police officers for one 12-year-old boy on a bicycle. Officer Martinez was the first backup to reach them. He was younger than Bradley and had a kinder face. What's the situation, Bradley? Juvenile was riding recklessly, failed to provide ID, creating a disturbance. Got a crowd of civilians here trying to interfere with police business. Bradley gestured at the neighbors. Kid's been telling stories about his father being special forces. Mother's supposedly on her way, but who knows if that's true? Officer Martinez looked around at the scene. Tyler could see him taking in the crowd of concerned neighbors, the cell phone cameras, and Tyler himself standing there with tears in his eyes holding a bicycle. Has the juvenile been combative or threatening in any way? Martinez asked. Bradley hesitated for just a moment. He's been argumentative and disrespectful. Tyler wanted to protest that he'd been polite the whole time, but his mother's words echoed in his head. Be polite, don't argue. The 3rd officer, Sergeant Davis, was older and had a more weathered face. He walked over to the group of neighbors first. Folks, I'm going to need you to move back and give us some space to work, he said. But his tone was much more respectful than Bradley's had been. Sergeant, Mrs. Patterson spoke up. I've been watching this whole thing, and I think there's been a misunderstanding. This boy lives in the neighborhood, and his family are good people. I appreciate your concern, ma'am, but we need to let the officers handle this situation. Sergeant Davis was firm but not unkind. Tyler watched as the neighbors reluctantly moved back, though many kept their phones out and continued recording. He felt more alone than ever, standing between 3 police officers with his citations in his hand and his bike beside him. Officer Martinez walked over to Tyler. What's your name, son? Tyler Williams, sir. And you live in this neighborhood? Yes, sir. On Oak Street. The blue house with white trim. Tyler pointed in the direction of his house. Martinez nodded and looked at the citations Bradley had written. Says here you were riding recklessly. Can you tell me what happened? Tyler took a deep breath and tried to keep his voice steady. I was just riding home from the library, sir. I was staying in the bike lane like I always do. Officer Bradley said I was weaving, but I don't think I was. And what about this Special Forces story? Martinez's voice was neutral, not mocking like Bradley's had been. It's not a story, sir. My dad really is in Special Forces. He's deployed in Germany right now. He's been gone for 14 months, but he's coming home next month. Martinez and Davis exchanged a look that Tyler couldn't read. Bradley stepped forward. Kid's been telling this tall tale since I stopped him. Typical absent father fantasy. Mother claims she's coming, but we'll see. Tyler felt anger flare up in his chest again. It's not a fantasy. My dad is a real soldier. He's protecting our country. Easy, son, Sergeant Davis said calmly. Nobody's saying your father isn't a good man. We just need to verify some information. But Tyler could see it in their eyes too now. They thought he was lying. They thought he was just another kid with no father making up stories to feel important. The injustice of it burned in his throat. As the officers talked among themselves in low voices, Tyler stood there holding his bike and feeling more helpless than he'd ever felt in his life. His mom was somewhere in traffic trying to get to him. His dad was thousands of miles away, probably asleep because of the time difference, and here he was, surrounded by people who were supposed to protect and serve, feeling like he was the enemy instead of a kid who just wanted to go home. The three officers were huddled together, discussing Tyler's situation in voices too low for him to hear. Tyler caught fragments like need to verify and possible domestic situation and take him in for processing. Each phrase made his stomach twist tighter. Officer. Bradley kept glancing back at him with a satisfied expression, like this whole mess was somehow proving his point. Officer Martinez seemed more thoughtful, looking between Tyler and the neighbors who were still watching from a respectful distance. Sergeant Davis was writing something in his notebook. Tyler tried calling his mom again, but it went straight to voicemail. She was probably driving and couldn't answer safely. He left a message. "Mom, they're talking about taking me somewhere. Please hurry." The afternoon sun was starting to get lower in the sky, casting longer shadows across the street. Tyler had been standing here for almost an hour now, and he was getting tired. His legs ached from holding his bike upright, and his backpack felt heavier with each passing minute. "Tyler," Mrs. Patterson called out suddenly. "Tyler, look!" Tyler turned to see what she was pointing at. A black SUV with tinted windows was turning onto Maple Street, moving slowly like the driver was looking for something. Tyler's heart jumped. That looked like a military vehicle, but it couldn't be. The SUV pulled over to the curb about 50 feet away from the group of police officers. Tyler watched with growing amazement as the driver's door opened, and a tall man in a military dress uniform stepped out. The man was black, with short graying hair and the kind of posture that came from years of military training. His uniform was perfectly pressed with ribbons and badges covering the left side of his chest. Tyler could see special patches on his shoulders that he'd learned to recognize from his dad's video calls. It was his father. Staff Sergeant David Williams, home from deployment a month early. Tyler's bike clattered to the ground as he started to run toward the SUV, but his father held up a hand in a gesture that Tyler immediately understood. "Stop. Stay where you are. Let me handle this." David Williams closed the car door and began walking toward the group of officers with the measured pace of someone who was completely in control of the situation. His bearing was unmistakably military, shoulders back, head high, every movement precise and purposeful. The conversation between the three officers had stopped completely. They were all staring at the approaching figure in obvious confusion and growing alarm. Officer Bradley was the first to find his voice. "Sir, this is a police matter. I'm going to have to ask you to keep moving." David Williams stopped about 10 feet away from the officers and came to attention. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear, with the kind of authority that didn't need to be loud to be heard. "I'm Staff Sergeant David Williams, United States Army Special Forces. I believe you're detaining my son." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler could hear his own heartbeat and the distant sound of traffic from the main road. None of the officers spoke for several long seconds. Officer Martinez was the first to recover. "Sir, we weren't aware. We're just trying to verify some information." "What information would that be?" David's voice remained perfectly calm, but there was steel underneath it. Officer Bradley's face had gone pale, but he tried to maintain his authority. "Sir, your son was riding recklessly and failed to provide proper identification. He's been issued several citations." David Williams looked at his son for the first time since arriving. Tyler could see his father taking in the scene. The three police officers, the crowd of neighbors, the citations in Tyler's hand, and the tears that Tyler was trying hard not to shed. "Tyler," his father said calmly, "are you hurt?" "No, sir," Tyler managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "Good." David turned back to Officer Bradley. "Now, officer?" "Bradley." "Officer Bradley. Officer Bradley. I'd like to understand exactly what happened here. What was my son doing that was so dangerous it required 3 police officers to handle?" Bradley's confidence was starting to crack. "He was weaving in and out of traffic, riding erratically." "On Maple Street?" David's eyebrows went up slightly. "This quiet residential street with a posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour?" "Well, yes, but And you determined this required multiple citations and a call for backup? Sergeant Davis stepped forward, clearly recognizing that the situation had shifted dramatically. Staff Sergeant Williams, we're just trying to ensure the safety of the community. Your son seemed confused about his identity and family situation. David's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes grew colder. Confused how exactly? He claimed his father was in Special Forces, Officer Bradley said, as if this explained everything. Kids make up stories like that when what, Officer Bradley? David's voice was still calm, but now it carried the kind of quiet menace that Tyler had heard in movies about soldiers. Bradley realized he was digging himself deeper. When their fathers aren't what, officer? Please finish your thought. The crowd of neighbors had moved closer again, sensing that the dynamic had completely changed. Tyler could see phones being raised to record this new development. Mrs. Patterson was smiling with what looked like relief and vindication. Officer Martinez tried to smooth things over. Staff Sergeant, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. We were just trying to verify information. David reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a military ID card. He handed it to Martinez, who examined it carefully before passing it to Sergeant Davis. Staff Sergeant David Williams, Davis read aloud. United States Army Special Forces. Currently assigned to the 10th Special Forces Group. David nodded. I've been deployed to Germany for the past 14 months. I returned to the States yesterday, a month ahead of schedule, as a surprise for my son's upcoming birthday. He gestured toward Tyler. I was driving home from the base when I saw police cars on my street. I recognized my son and came to investigate. Officer Bradley looked like he wanted to disappear. The confident, mocking tone he'd used with Tyler was completely gone. Sir, we were just doing our job. Were you? David's voice remained level. Because from what I observed as I approached, it looked like you were humiliating a 12-year-old boy for having the audacity to tell the truth about his father. Tyler watched this exchange with a mixture of pride, relief, and amazement. This was his dad, the hero he'd been telling everyone about. The man who'd been protecting other people's children while his own son was being treated like a criminal for riding a bicycle. Sergeant Davis cleared his throat. Staff Sergeant, perhaps we can discuss this situation and come to an understanding. Oh, I understand perfectly, David replied. I understand that my son was stopped for supposedly riding recklessly on a quiet residential street. I understand that when he truthfully identified himself and his family, he was mocked and disbelieved. I understand that instead of being helped, he was issued citations and threatened with detention. David walked over to Tyler and put a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. I also understand that my neighbors had to come out of their homes to try to protect my child, because the people who are supposed to serve and protect were doing neither. Tyler leaned into his father's touch, feeling safe for the first time in over an hour. His dad was here. His dad was real. His dad was exactly the hero Tyler had always said he was. Officer Bradley made one last attempt to salvage the situation. Sir, we deal with a lot of kids who make up stories about absent fathers. It's very common. David's hand tightened slightly on Tyler's shoulder. Officer Bradley, my son has never been without a father. He's been without his father's physical presence due to my military service, but he has never, not for one day, been without a father who loves him and is proud of him. The officer fell silent, finally understanding the distinction and the weight of what he'd said to Tyler. David looked around at the crowd of neighbors, then back at the three officers. Now, I believe there are some citations here that need to be discussed, and some apologies that need to be made. Don't you think? The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. David Williams stood with his hand on his son's shoulder, his military bearing unmistakable, while the three police officers shuffled uncomfortably under his steady gaze. The crowd of neighbors watched in complete silence, many still recording on their phones. Sergeant Davis was the first to speak, his voice careful and measured. Staff Sergeant Williams, I think we can work this out. Perhaps we can dismiss these citations and... Perhaps? David's eyebrows rose slightly. Sergeant Davis, with all due respect, there's no perhaps about this situation. My son was stopped for riding his bicycle in his own neighborhood. When he provided truthful information about his family, he was mocked and humiliated by Officer Bradley here. Officer Bradley's face was flushed red now, a mixture of embarrassment and defensive anger. Sir, we get kids lying to us all the time. I was just doing my job. Your job is to protect and serve, Officer Bradley. Was mocking a 12-year-old boy about his deployed father protecting anyone. Was making him feel ashamed of his family serving the community. David reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Tyler, tell me exactly what Officer Bradley said about your father. Tyler looked up at his dad, then glanced nervously at Officer Bradley. Dad, do I have to? Yes, son. It's important that everyone knows exactly what happened here. Tyler took a deep breath. He said I was making up stories about having a father in special forces. He said lots of kids make up tales about their absent fathers. He said if you were really a soldier, maybe you would have taught me how to ride a bike properly. He said maybe you would have taught me some respect. David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained calm. I see, and what else? He said I watch too many movies. He said absent parents are never around when their kids need them. He asked if I wondered whether you were really coming back. Tyler's voice got smaller with each sentence. The crowd of neighbors made small sounds of disapproval. Mrs. Patterson shook her head in disgust. Mr. Chen looked angry. Even Officer Martinez was looking at Bradley with obvious discomfort. David looked directly at Officer Bradley. Is that an accurate account of what you said to my son? Bradley's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Sir, it might have been taken out of context. Which part was taken out of context? The part where you suggested I hadn't taught my son respect? Or the part where you made him worry that his father might not come home from a combat deployment? Sergeant Davis stepped forward, clearly trying to de-escalate. Staff Sergeant, I'm sure Officer Bradley didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? David turned his attention to Davis. Didn't mean to abuse his authority? Didn't mean to target a child based on assumptions and prejudice? Didn't mean to violate basic standards of professional conduct? David pulled out his phone and began recording. For the record, I am Staff Sergeant David Williams, service number 123456789, currently assigned to the 10th Special Forces Group. The date is today, and I am standing on Maple Street with my 12-year-old son, Tyler Williams, who was stopped while riding his bicycle home from the public library. He turned the camera toward the officers. I am documenting this incident because my son was issued citations for riding his bicycle in his own neighborhood and was subjected to verbal abuse by Officer Bradley when he truthfully stated that his father serves in the military. Officer Bradley looked panicked. Sir, you can't record us without permission. Actually, Officer Bradley, I can. This is a public street and you're public servants performing your duties. I have every right to document this interaction. A car pulled up behind the police vehicles and Tyler's mom jumped out before it had fully stopped. Linda Williams was still wearing her hospital scrubs and her face was tight with worry and anger. Tyler! She ran to her son and wrapped him in a fierce hug, then looked up at her husband with tears in her eyes. David, how are you? When did you? I wanted to surprise you both. I got in yesterday and was going to wait until Tyler got home from school tomorrow. David's voice softened when he spoke to his wife. But I saw the police cars and recognized Tyler. Linda Williams turned to face the officers and Tyler had never seen his gentle mother look so angry. Which one of you gave my son these tickets for riding his bike? Officer Bradley raised his hand weakly. And which one of you made my son cry by telling him his father was a liar? Bradley didn't respond, so Sergeant Davis answered. Ma'am, there seems to have been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Linda's voice rose. A misunderstanding is when you get someone's name wrong. This was harassment of a child. David put his arm around his wife. Linda, I'm handling this. But I want you to hear what happened. He turned back to the officers. Here's what's going to happen. First, these citations are going to be torn up and removed from any system where they were recorded. Sergeant Davis nodded quickly. Of course, Staff Sergeant. That's not a problem. Second, I want the name and contact information for Officer Bradley's supervisor. This incident needs to be formally reported and investigated. Officer Bradley finally spoke up, his voice shaky. Sir, I want to apologize. I made some wrong assumptions and I said things I shouldn't have said. David looked at him steadily. Officer Bradley, you didn't just make wrong assumptions. You used your position of authority to intimidate and humiliate a child. You made my son question whether his father loves him and whether I'm coming home safely. Do you understand the psychological impact of that on a 12-year-old? Tyler felt his dad's hand squeeze his shoulder gently. But Tyler doesn't need your apology, Officer Bradley. He needs you to be a better police officer. He needs you to treat other children with respect and dignity. He needs you to remember that your job is to protect kids like him, not tear them down." Mrs. Patterson called out from the crowd, "David, we all saw what happened. We recorded it." That officer was completely out of line. David nodded to her gratefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson, all of you. Thank you for looking out for my son when I couldn't be here." He turned back to the officers. "Sergeant Davis, I'll be filing a formal complaint with your department. I'll also be sending copies of the video footage to the mayor's office and the local news stations. This kind of behavior toward children is unacceptable." Officer Martinez, who had been quiet throughout most of the exchange, stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant Williams, as a police officer and as a father myself, I want to apologize for what happened here. This doesn't represent the values of our department." David studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I appreciate that, Officer Martinez, and I hope you'll remember this incident when you're training new officers or dealing with children in the future." Sergeant Davis was already tearing up Tyler's citations. "Staff Sergeant, these are voided. There will be no record of this incident on your son's file." "That's a start," David said, "but this isn't over." "Tyler?" "Yes, sir?" "Do you have anything you want to say to these officers?" Tyler looked up at his father, then at the three policemen. He thought about everything that had happened, all the fear and humiliation and anger he'd felt. Then he thought about what his father had always taught him about being the bigger person. "I hope you'll believe other kids when they tell you the truth about their families," Tyler said quietly, "and I hope you'll remember that just because someone's dad isn't here doesn't mean they don't have a dad who loves them." Officer Bradley's face crumpled slightly. "Son, you're right. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right." David Williams looked around at the crowd of neighbors, then back at the officers. "Gentlemen, I think we're done here. Tyler, get your bike. Let's go home." As Tyler picked up his bicycle, the neighbors began to applaud. It started with Mrs. Patterson, then spread through the crowd until everyone was clapping. Tyler felt his face get warm, but this time it was from pride, not embarrassment. The three police officers stood watching as the Williams family walked toward their house. David had his arm around Linda, and Tyler walked his bike beside them, finally feeling safe and protected again. As they reached their front yard, Tyler looked back to see Officer Bradley still standing by his patrol car, staring after them. The other two officers were already getting into their vehicles, but Bradley seemed frozen in place. "Dad?" Tyler said as they reached the front door. "Yes, son. Thank you for coming home early." David Williams knelt down and pulled his son into a tight hug. "Tyler, I will always come for you. Always. No matter where I am in the world. If you need me, I will find a way to get to you." As they went inside their house together for the first time in 14 months, Tyler realized something important. His father really was a hero. Not because he wore a uniform or served overseas, but because he loved his family enough to protect them, no matter what. And that was a lesson worth more than any citation or any cruel words from someone who didn't understand what it meant to be part of a military family. The next morning, the local news ran a story about the incident. Officer Bradley was suspended pending investigation, and the police department announced new training programs on community relations and bias awareness. But for Tyler Williams, the most important outcome was much simpler. His dad was home, his family was together, and he knew without a doubt that he was loved and protected.